I'd like to start with refuting what I believe to be a false narrative at this committee. And I've listened very carefully to my Liberal colleagues. I've listened to some of the commentary from these witnesses. And I guess to a Canadian observer who is not entirely familiar with the circumstances that surrounded the creation of this particular meeting, one would think that all is well in Canada, that everything is working as it's intended to work. The CSIS is working appropriately, that the CBSA is working appropriately, law enforcement's working appropriately, and the government is doing its job. Well, that can't be furthest from the truth. The number one responsibility of Justin Trudeau and his government, number one responsibility of the CBSA and CSIS, is to keep Canadians safe. Not some of the time, all of the time. And what has happened here is we were within a hair's breadth, minutes, hours, potentially days away of a mass casualty on the Toronto Jewish community. So clearly this wasn't hatched overnight by the two accused. They were probably planning for days, weeks, months, all under the radar of CSIS, all under the radar of immigration, all under the radar of CBSA, all under the radar of our law enforcement. So I've got one phrase to say to this committee, to this committee and to Canadians. Thank God for France. Thank God for French intelligence that gave CSIS the tip. This wasn't a national in France who was planning something against Canadians. This was an individual that we granted Canadian citizenship to that completely fell under the radar map until a tip went to CSIS. And then CSIS got the RCMP involved, and we stopped what could have been a significant mass casualty event. And I'm sorry to all the witnesses, you failed in your responsibilities to keep us safe. You didn't do your job. There, but the grace of God and good French intelligence, they are behind bars where they should be. Now, I listened very carefully to Mr. McCrory's words. We have a robust, we have a thorough system. Our reviews of citizens or of individuals coming into our country, it takes time. You talked about what Canadians expect. Well, sir, I can tell you that I've got reports from news media that strongly suggests that the two accused in custody is by no means a one-off. In fact, I'm going to read from this report. This is from the National Post from a few weeks ago. American authorities recently announced the apprehension of 233 terrorist suspects seeking entry from Canada into the United States. Were you aware of that, CSIS?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm not familiar with the direct reference that you may be alleging to in the media.
How about Mr. McCrory? Was CBSA aware of this?
Again, like my colleague, I'm not aware of the direct reference that you're speaking
233 would-be terrorists walking the streets of Canada, all under the radar map of this Prime Minister, this government, and our professional public service and our security agency that wanted to get in the United States and wreak havoc in that country, and they were walking freely. We do, and I support my friend and colleague Mr. Motz's assessment. We have a broken system, and I hope to dear God for the sake of the safety of Canadians, you identify very quickly and robustly where the breakdown happened and fire the individuals who didn't do their job. Now, Ms. Damoff talks about how difficult it is to access the dark web. Well, you know what? Canadians aren't expecting Ms. Damoff to protect us. We're expecting CSIS, law enforcement, and the government who has access to the dark web. And this should have been on your radar map, and you failed us. There again, but the grace of God and good intelligence from France. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Did anyone wish to respond? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I would like to repeat my earlier testimony that I would refute the premise that this was a failure.
Minister, 2 weeks ago, actually 16 days ago, the Prime Minister notified Canada that his government is taking the case very seriously. He secondly said this is a very serious situation that you, sir, as the Minister of Public Safety, would be doing a full follow-up to understand exactly how this happened. The Minister will share all that we learned in the appropriate moment. That was 16 days ago. You've indicated the process by which you've disclosed this 5-page document to committee, literally 20 minutes before the commencement. In my former career as a Crown attorney, if I tried to pull something like this in front of a judge, I would get a severe tongue lashing. This is not procedural fairness. This is highly, highly suspicious in terms of the timing by which you release that. So, moving on. I too want to talk about the video, the notorious video from 2015. According to Global News, they easily obtained a copy of that. It appeared to match the one that resulted in the aggravated assault charge that the RCMP recently laid. It shows a prisoner wearing an orange jumpsuit and suspended from a pole in a desert. A man wearing a black robe and a cap bearing the ISIS logo then hacks at the prisoner's limbs with a sword, cutting off his hands, cutting off his feet. His face briefly visible, he appears to be a middle-aged man with a henna-tinted beard. It is unclear whether the victim was already dead when he was dismembered. The video titled "Deterring Spies" was published in June 2015 by the media arm of the ISIS branch in western Iraq, according to an expert. Now, we know that Mr. El-Didi received his citizenship in September 2023. I'm looking at the chronology under security screening note. Application was referred to CSIS for security checks in November 2023. CSIS returned a favorable recommendation. What type of message does that send to Canadians regarding our national security agency with a video that was widely distributed some 8 years previous, was not flagged against any advanced biometrics? The man's face was clearly visible. Is CSIS not tracking these videos? What other terrorists are walking the streets here in Canada right now waiting to commit terrorist acts on innocent Canadians? What the hell is going on?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Brock, I would also think that when in your previous job as a Crown attorney, you would be commenting with the benefit of parliamentary privilege on something that you know very well may form part of an evidence, part of the evidence in an upcoming criminal trial. As the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP said, I'm not sure you would on the steps of a courthouse in the middle of an ongoing trial have been as dramatic as you were for your social media clip now.
Sir, Minister, I am not a Crown attorney right now. I am a parliamentarian asking the tough questions that Canadians want to know. Why did our National Security Agency not flag this video 8 years prior and use the image of this terrorist, if not killer, who's dismembering limbs from the person in a pole? Why was that image not flagged against every other asylum claimant to ensure that there was adequate security checks being done? According to your note, CSIS cleared this individual, returning a favorable recommendation. How did that slip through? How did that slip through, sir?
So again, you're referring to alleged dramatic images.
It's not alleged. It happened. The video is not alleged.
I think we should be careful talking about criminal evidence, but as I said in my opening comments, and Ted Gallivan is going to be able to give you some precision with respect to the video and how security screening agencies came into possession of that information. At the time when the relevant decisions were being made by the Immigration Department and the security services were doing their work, the existence of that video or the information that you have recounted to the committee now was not available. And I think Mr. Gallivan can provide some precision in terms of why that was the case.
Well, it begs the question as to why.
Mr. Brock, that's enough.
My questions in the 3 minutes will be directed to you, Deputy Commissioner. So I know that we don't want to talk a lot about the video. I appreciate it from a legal perspective, why we are perhaps approaching on dangerous territory, but I'm not getting into the evidence per se or the ability of a Crown to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm taking a look at the video at face value. There is an unknown quotient here, whether the victim was alive or already dead before this particular accused chose to cut off his hands and feet. If in fact he were alive, it opens up the possibility to attempt murder charges, or if the actions of the accused caused the death of the victim, in essence bleeding out, then we'd be looking at murder charges under the criminal code. Or if the person were already dead and then the dismemberment took place, then we'd be looking at a Section 182 offense regarding the indignity committed to a dead body. Are these potentially some of the issues? I'm not asking for a positive confirmation, but rather an acknowledgement that what I just described to you could potentially be live issues in regards to a police investigation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. As earlier indicated, a significant amount of work has gone into this investigation in a short period of time with a significant amount of resources dedicated. I do want to highlight the excellent work of the GTA Inset and all of our police of jurisdiction. We do have a matter before the court, and of course, with such a large national security investigation, although there are charges before the judicial system, our investigation continues. And so I'm limited to what I can say, and I must refrain from commenting on specifics or ongoing investigative pieces. But what I can tell you is that we continue to actively investigate, and we continue to do the work that is required as a part of the investigation. So charges have been laid, but we have an ongoing active investigation. Thank you.
I'll read between the lines with that statement, and I thank you for that statement, that potentially there is an affirmative response to the question I put to you, although I'm not asking for any confirmation. I want to talk briefly with the time I have available. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have? 40 seconds. 40 seconds. Biometrics, is it only in relation to fingerprints, or are we now advanced in terms of taking a look at facial recognition as part of biometrics?
So, Mr. Chair, the biometrics includes the fingerprints, and I'll have to confirm whether it does do the facial recognition piece, but biometrics is certainly the information is on the fingerprints.
Would you confirm that to committee within a couple of weeks after your appearance?
We will confirm that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.